Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Thank you for stopping by and I really appreciate it. Today is going to be a little bit of different video, and if you don't mind, I would like to tell a story first before I go into the craft. And this is just a story that I've kind of recently gone through, but it will give you the background and the meaning of my DIY and how special it is to me. So several years ago, I tanned during the summer just like many people would. You know, you want to be summer ready, you don't want to be white and pale. I am half Vietnamese and half white, so my skin is very fair. It's fair, but I do tan very easily without burning. So, you know, like I said, I would tan quite often in the summer, and for some reason, you know, I really started thinking about how I needed to stop tanning, because it just made me start thinking about getting skin cancer. And you know, I know being out in the sun and tanning, not using, you know, any sunscreen or anything like that is a pretty big contributor to skin cancer. Well, I stopped tanning, and I've had to accept myself and love myself for my fair skin and not really care if, you know, people thought I was pale. It didn't really matter. This is how God made me. This is how He envisioned me in His mind. So I had to accept that. With that being said, on June 6th, we had to rush my dad to the emergency room. And, well, let me back up a little bit. A couple months ago, I went to go visit my parents, and my dad had a huge lump, on his shoulder, and I never saw it or anything. And I tried to get him to go to the doctor and go get it looked at, and he's one of those guys. He's always been the caretaker. He didn't ever want any fuss about him, so he was just, you know, he never got sick really, and so he just played it off. Well, I had went back probably a few weeks to a month later, and it still hadn't gotten any better, and his hand and his arm had actually started swelling. And so I begged him to go to the doctor and get it looked at, and I told him I would take him, and he just flat out refused. He would not go. So on June 6th, we had to end up taking the ambulance had to come out. My mom had to call 911, and they came out and got my dad, where they admitted him into the hospital. They looked at his wound, and he was very sick, and so they did a punch biopsy on it, which is just the skin biopsy. That's what they call it. So they had also determined that he was very sepsis, and at that point we only thought he was sepsis, but come to find out he had cancer as well. And when we originally found out, it was that he had cancer in the lungs. So they still had to do some other CT scans and try to figure out, was the lung cancer the originator, or, you know, this thing on his shoulder, was it cancerous? They were just trying to figure things out. So come to find out, he had metastasis, I can't remember the actual word, melanoma cancer, but really what it is, it started as melanoma cancer, and it spread through his whole body. And for those of you that don't know, I'm sorry, melanoma is the worst because it spreads so fast. And lots of times you don't even know that you have cancer. So it's very hard to determine ahead of time. In his situation, he was so far gone in the cancer, he'd had it for so long. The doctors were assuming that he had the cancer for about 2 years. The lump on his shoulder was the melanoma cancer, and this was one of the most disturbing things I saw, and it just made me feel so bad for him. It had grown literally to this size on his back, and it was horrible. I won't give you all the gross details, but it was horrible. There was no way in the world he was not in pain. The doctors said that with as much as the cancer had spread through his body, that he had to have been in pain for quite some time. But again, he was always the caretaker. So, we went through, the first doctor was very open and honest with us and said he figures they only had 2 weeks. Devastating. The oncologist finally got the biopsy back from the results from the biopsy back, and determined that he was, they verified what we already knew, that it was cancer. And he actually gave him 6 months to more. In that time, we'd seen different doctors, and there was another doctor that talked to us, and my sisters and I had just begged him, please be, I'm sorry for my phone ringing, guys, but we had begged for them to be brutally honest with us, and the gentleman actually said, the man, that my dad would only last days. So we had to prepare for hospice. There was time when I was in the hospital, my dad didn't even know who I was. At night, it was worse on him because he just had all these things, like his brain wasn't right, he wasn't getting enough oxygen in his brain. So he had all these stories that we knew were not true, but to him they were actual events that happened. And but there was nothing that we could do. So by the time we got him home, we had some other family members that had came from out of town. My oldest sister, my daughter, and her son came, and we were all able to visit him at my sister's house because that's where he went for hospice care, because my mother is 75 and could not take care of my dad if he went home to hospice with her. So with that being said, my dad passed away June 16th. He'd only lived 10 days. But he is in heaven with our Father and my brother. My main reason for filming this was because I just want everybody to, if you're gonna tan and you want to look good, first off, in my opinion, you have to be able to love yourself for the way God made you. And secondly, just if nothing else, think of the long-term effects. I mean, what are the long-term effects on your body? You know, how's it going to affect you down the road? Because you have to remember, what affects you also affects your family members and your friends. You're not in the fight alone. They all fight with you. So, my plea is that you don't tan. And I know there's a lot of people that's not going to, but just please at least look at the other options, such as spray tans, just something, because I would hate to have to think that somebody else is going to have to go through this. My dad was not the kind of man who, he didn't tan. He was out in the sun a lot because on the weekends he worked in the yard and he did all the yard work. That was like his getaway, I guess if you could say. He loved being out there, so he didn't use sunscreen and stuff. So, you know, he's very fair skinned and he did burn a lot and did tan a lot. A lot of it was up on his shoulders and stuff because he would wear like tank tops and stuff outside. So just please be careful in everything that you do and think about others and remember whatever may happen to you will happen to others. So thank you for listening to my story. This actually is a cancer awareness wreath that I made for my dad for melanoma. And honestly, 2 weeks ago, a lady named Sonia Coleman, one of my viewers, had watched another one of my wreath videos and asked me if I could actually help her out and do a cancer awareness ribbon wreath. And it's just kind of weird how it just was so coincidental. So this is for my dad and for you, Sonia. So I want to thank you for stopping by, and I hope you guys have a blessed day. So I'm starting off with the Deco Mesh 21-inch from Hobby Lobby, some of these black zip ties, and this ribbon awareness wreath frame from the Dollar Tree. So what I do is I take all of the ends and I kind of just scrunch them together. Make sure that you kind of got them a little even and that you're leaving enough of the tail. Here when I had zip tied it down in first, I realized that there was a part of the Deco Mesh that wasn't in there, so I had to take it off and make the ends a little more uniform. So what I'm actually doing is I attached the Deco Mesh to the underside. So you'll see here in a second where I take it and I curl it under the frame and I attach it there. That way when I make my first bubble, then it will cover the end of the wire frame. And then from there, each time I attach it, so here I make my first bubble, just trying to get it straight and to the length that I like, and then I attach it with the zip tie, and then I have to kind of unfold the Deco Mesh from the bottom to kind of like I've got a loss for words here, guys, I'm sorry. So each time I make a bubble, I cut off the zip tie, and then I go up underneath the bubble and I spread out all the Deco Mesh that you kind of see me doing here. Now, when you are making your bubbles, then you gotta make sure the edges are curled in, and that will help you keep your bubble shape. You want everything tucked downward, and as you can kind of see, I keep that form while I am attaching each of the bubbles, and then I spread it all out, all the Deco Mesh out, to make it fluffier, and it will cover the entire wreath frame. So here I'm showing where I am going to go over the crossbar in between a couple of the poofs so I can fill in the opposite leg. And again, all I do is fluff them out, make another poof, attach with the zip tie, and continue on until I am completely finished. A 10-inch Deco Mesh instead of the 21-inch should suffice, and it may not be as difficult to kind of pull out the Deco Mesh from underneath to make it fluffier. It really wasn't difficult, but it might just be a little bit easier using a 10-inch Deco Mesh. So this wreath actually did use up quite a bit, not all of the roll, but the majority of the roll. Let's just say there wasn't enough of this roll for me to be able to do anything else with. So as I'm getting closer to the end, what you'll see me do is kind of how I started the first leg, where I zip tied the end of the Deco Mesh to the back. I'm going to actually take and form another loop and flip the frame over and attach it, as you see me doing here, to the back side. That way it makes the last loop go over the over the frame, and it will finish it up. All your ends will be in the back, and you won't see any of those frayed or cut off ends. And so as you see, it turned out really nice and pretty. So I've got this Dollar Tree sign from the Crafter's Square, and I plan on making my own sign. And what I'm doing is just using this Dollar Tree stencil, and I'm going to stencil out the words pale and tan. And you'll see here in a minute where after I stencil them out, I just go in with the Sharpie and I color in the words. Now what I don't show is how I used the Sharpie, and I just made the little dashed lines all over the sign to add just a tiny bit more cuteness. And I used the Dollar Tree smaller black letters to spell out the words "is the new." So the sign will read "pale is the new tan," and that's just a saying for the melanoma awareness. So I really like how the sign turned out. I think it's wonderful, and this is for you, Dad. I love you. I miss you, and I'll always have you in my heart.